Loving thy neighbour is easier said than done.
The guy is a nasty piece of work.
Yes, they nearly got me arrested.
1 in 5 have been at war with next door.
I was frightened.
Really? Stay away from our piece of land.
Give me my dog!
You bitch!
I'm calling the police right now.
When the garden fence marks enemy lines,
Have you got your recorder on? Good.
your home life can turn into a living hell.
What the hell's the matter with you?
Coming up,
He said to me, "You're racist."
when war breaks out,
He said there'd be trouble, big trouble.
What are you running away for?
some neighbours will use anything to lash out.
She's stabbing me! She's stabbing me!
But a sharp tongue
She said, "You've got cancer. You're going to die."
can cut twice as deep.
You bitch. You bitch.
The town of Ludlow in Shropshire seemed like the ideal place for Pauline Bruce and her husband Tony to move to after he retired in 2003.
The town is a very old country market town. It's so peaceful, so quiet, and that's what we look forward to in our retirement.
Their new home was in a retirement community of mobile homes on the outskirts of town.
The neighbours are all very friendly. There's no children allowed except visitors, so it was very, very peaceful.
Pauline's son John, from a previous marriage, also lives nearby.
I come see Mum a couple of times a week. She often sends me text messages needing bread, milk from the shop, so it's a good reason and a good excuse just to pop in and check on, see how she's doing.
2 years after moving in, Pauline and Tony got a new neighbour. Yvonne Ireland Evans moved in next door.
Our relationship with Yvonne started off very well. She was a very nice person. If she could help you in any way, she would. She used to knock the door and come in and have a cup of tea, and we became friends.
But things changed the following summer when Pauline and another neighbour joined forces to enter the community into the Heart of England gardening competition.
It was exciting because it brought people together on the park, but Yvonne wasn't involved in that.
And what should have been a happy occasion quickly turned sour.
Both Tony and I said hello to Yvonne, but she totally ignored us. And I said, "What was the matter, Yvonne?" I said, "You haven't been speaking to us recently." And she said that because I'd got a new best friend, she didn't want to know us anymore. I thought that was a bit petty, really, because I didn't realise you were restricted to having just one friend in life.
Relations between the neighbours quickly deteriorated.
Tony and I started having silent phone calls. The phone would ring, and Tony used to sit here. He'd pick up the telephone, and by the time he got it to his ear, the phone at the other end had been put back down. So we used to dial 1471, and the caller had withheld their number. And then we started getting calls during the course of the night.
In the space of just a few weeks, Pauline and Tony received dozens of anonymous calls.
It unnerved us very much, and scary as well, because you don't know why people are making silent phone calls. You don't know who they are.
Pauline and Tony called the police, who advised them to ask the phone company to trace the calls.
They were traced back to Yvonne's landline, and the police officer came round to see us and said that he was going round to speak to her.
Yvonne was given a fixed penalty notice for making the calls and fined £80.
Obviously, after that, we thought the phone calls would stop, which they did, but all the silly little incidents didn't. Very often, when Yvonne went past our home, she would invariably turn round and stick two fingers up at us. If she saw us coming in, she quite often opened the kitchen window and shouted abuse, calling both of us actually peeping toms and perverts. But she seemed to make sure most of the time there was nobody else about. So we got no witnesses.
Pauline claims this type of abuse went on for the next 4 years.
He got to a stage with Yvonne's behaviour. First thing in the morning, you'd sort of wake up and think, oh, I hope nothing happens today. You get a sick feeling in your stomach.
But soon, Pauline and Tony had a more serious fight on their hands.
In March 2011, Tony was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He'd got 3 to 6 months without treatment and 6 to 12 months with treatment.
It wasn't long before Yvonne found out about Tony's illness.
One occasion we came back from the hospital and she came down the path and stood in front of Tony and said, "You've got cancer, you're going to die," and then just walked off.
But when Pauline's son John decided to capture the abuse on camera, events took a more serious turn.
You're visiting here.
That's right.
Here. Look at you shaking. Look at you.
Coming up, one woman's daily diary of hell.
8:30 p.m, the two boys threw a ball over the fence.
And an elderly couple who find themselves on the wrong side of the law.
They nearly got me arrested. Yeah.
And put her in a cell, would you believe? Put her in a cell.
Issues with next door can happen over the garden fence. But when your closest neighbours are on top of you, the slightest noise can feel like an invasion. In East London, 79-year-old Ellen Harris says she's been pushed to breaking point.
When you're going through, or what we've been going through, night after night, then the normal thing would be to get aggressive.
Ellen and Cyril Harris have lived in the same flat in Walthamstow, London for over 60 years.
Bit fresh out here today, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
We've got many friends around here, especially this first one on my left.
Ellen and Cyril have travelled all over the world, but they enjoy their biggest passion from the comfort of their armchairs.
We watch game shows and all detective things.
I like action films, war films.
And after having a bit of dinner, we watch TV for the rest of the evening, both fall asleep.
I don't fall asleep.
But after 60 years of relative peace, in 2008, their idyllic existence was interrupted when new neighbours, the El-Wakari family, moved in upstairs.
The first day they moved in, I went upstairs, went inside, about 10 minutes, quarter of an hour, had quite a good conversation. It was very amiable.
But unlike the previous tenants who'd lived there, the El-Wakaris had young children.
We started to hear quite a bit of noise late at night. We could hear all the footsteps above, especially out here in our hallway.
And for Cyril and Ellen, home life became unbearable.
As soon as we put our TV on, then the child will come into the room and start.
Rolling balls over the laminated flooring. They move furniture and scrape it along the floor.
I mean, the child would jump with 2 feet quite often, bang something on the ceiling. And that's what we started to have to put up with.
May El-Wakari agreed to speak to us, but asked us to conceal her identity.
I moved in here. I only have my son, and he used to go to nursery and he used to go to school. He was hardly at home, and she used to make so much about his running around and doing things like that, but nothing like that ever happened.
But Ellen insists the noise was unbearable.
I went upstairs. The tenant stood at her front door. There was a small argument. Our voices got raised, and I turned away and said, "I'm going to the council."
But Mrs El-Wakari got to the council with her version of events first.
She did use a lot of racial words to my son and also family that were visiting.
The council responded to these allegations by sending Ellen a letter, warning her about her behaviour.
I can honestly say, put my hand on the Bible, and honestly say there's been nothing from us regarding raciality.
But Mrs. El-Wakari insists it wasn't the first time Ellen had made her opinions known.
Even before I viewed the property, she opened her house and said to me, all these foreigners moving to this country, Britain's not Britain anymore.
Ellen Harris says that she said no such thing. And when the Housing Association investigated, they couldn't prove it one way or the other, so the matter was dropped. But before long, there was a more heated exchange.
I came out here. I could hear the neighbour above me on his mobile phone, talking very, very loudly. It was echoing all round the cul-de-sac, and it was 12:15 at night. So I just leaned out and I said, would you mind turning it down a bit, the noise? And that's when I was started to be abused. And he said to me, you're a racist, you're a witch, and if you don't go inside now, I'll come down and smash your face in.
The El-Wakaris say that this simply never happened, and when she called the police, Ellen was told that with no proof, there was nothing they could do.
I felt like going up there and doing something dangerously effective on these people for being like they were against my wife and being that it affected her so much.
Fresh allegations were to come, but it was 79-year-old Ellen who was to be accused.
She said, got me arrested. Yeah.
And put her in a cell, would you believe? Put her in a cell.
In Shropshire, Pauline and Tony Bruce's dreams of a peaceful retirement were shattered when their neighbour, Yvonne Ireland Evans, was fined for making nuisance phone calls to their home. Stories about the conflict between Pauline and Yvonne quickly spread through the park.
According to Yvonne, we were the ones victimising her. She said that we used to watch her, we used to shout things at her.
For Pauline's son John, this was the final straw. Because the retirement park only allows people over 50 to live there, John was only ever a daily visitor. But despite this, he took it upon himself to take action.
I sent her an anonymous letter, basically just saying, back the hell away. I will warn you now, leave it be. Nobody believes the things you say, which I find tragically sad. But only you are to blame, Yvonne. Harassment is a serious offence, punishable by prison. Would you like to go there?
Yvonne reported John to the police for harassment, but her evidence wasn't enough to bring any charges against him.
I guess I was, not desperate, but I just wanted it to stop.
John wanted to prove that his parents were the real victims, so began using his camera to record Yvonne's behaviour. And one day in the garden, the situation turned ugly.
I was pottering around in the garden here. She was either side of her fence.
Have you got your recorder on?
Yeah, I have.
Good. Because you're visiting here.
That's right.
Here.
And she started spreading her mouth off about Tony having cancer.
Oh dear, guess who's got cancer? And guess who's got terminal cancer?
She had a approximately 4-foot long branch.
Go on, have another swipe, have another swipe. Go on. Go on, go on then. Go on, go on, go on. Huh?
Come on then.
Oh, come on then.
What are you running away for? Hey?
Oh.
What are you running away for?
I wasn't instigating, I didn't taunt her. I did step closer. I'd seen that she'd got a weapon, a branch in her hand.
John showed his video to the police, and Yvonne was made to sign a community resolution, preventing her from making any further contact with Pauline, Tony, or John.
I was glad that A, she signed it, and B, that she'd understood the actions to be taken. But things did not quieten down. Within 2 days, the second bout of nuisance phone calls had started.
Over the next 2 months, Pauline and Tony were bombarded with yet more anonymous calls.
Tony was terminally ill with cancer. So, of course, you have precious time left together, and to have that spoiled by someone making unnecessary phone calls to you, it just made things worse.
Once again, the calls were traced back to Yvonne. She was charged with harassment, pleaded guilty in court and fined £100.
Why do it when you know Tony's dying? Why cause us this much hassle? Why do it?
In February 2012, less than a year after his diagnosis, Tony lost his battle with cancer. Pauline hoped Yvonne would allow her to grieve in peace.
Unfortunately, she didn't seem to bother me so much. She turned her attention to John.
And before long, the battle between Yvonne and John would spiral completely out of control.
Your dog just attacked my dog. I got it on video. I got it on video.
Hey, give me my dog!
18:36 hours, Mr. D with the two boys threw a ball over the fence and ran indoors. Friday the 6th.
Not everyone uses a camera to record their neighbourly disputes.
2014, 7:25, 29th of the 7th, 2013, the two boys threw a ball over the fence.
38-year-old Kim Aman and her mum Mary keep a diary to log complaints about the family next door.
At 8 a.m. Both parents were in the garden. They knew what they did. From the noise level to the harassment, every day is a living hell. You just don't know what you're waking up to.
Where is that coming from?
That's coming from Mr. Deva's house. That's the type of noise we have to put up with.
When Kim and her mum Mary were looking for a new home in 2012, they fell in love with a house on this quiet suburban street in East London.
This is our living room. This is my mum.
Hello.
It's Fox. Do you want a tea?
All right then.
Living with my mum, yeah, it's not too bad. She's easy to get on with. She likes to laugh, likes to joke. She does her things, I do my things. There is no rules, there is no curfew. That was when I was younger.
The house seemed like all they could ever want.
When we first moved in, it had a really nice kind of warm atmosphere to the place. My mum, she was like, oh, it's a garden that I can kind of use, maintain, most of all turn it into something.
But just a few months after moving in, Kim heard that her next-door neighbours, the Deva family, had spent the last 2 years trying to get planning permission for a rear extension. Fearing that any building work could disrupt their peace and quiet, Kim wanted details.
Me and my mum went over to the fence and approached Mr. Deva. Mr. Deva said it's going to be quite a big extension. He said, I want to take your wall down and your fence down. At that point, my mum turned around and said, you can't do that because it's council property. And he said, well, I can do it. He said, even if I don't get permission, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway.
Salajdin Deva was seeking permission from the council to build a 2-storey extension. But Kim and Mary were worried that by taking the fence down and building along the boundary line, it would encroach into their garden.
I think he just thinks the garden's his, basically. Because he owns his property, he seems to think he's entitled to take other people's boundaries.
Kim and Mary wrote to the council, lodging an official objection to the new extension, and began garden plans of their own, in the form of a memorial to a beloved family member.
My mum created a small flower bed, which contains a little wheelbarrow, which is in memory of our previous dog, Candy. And unfortunately, we lost her at the age of 6 and she passed away. Just to remember her, really.
But Kim and Mary's hopes of enjoying their new garden didn't last long.
February the 6th, 2014, the two boys threw a ball over the fence. As I come out in my garden, I noticed there's a football landed roughly around about here. Walking back down the garden, another ball come over and it landed just here. Obviously we did give them back, but there was so many coming over that the balls began to become a nuisance.
By objecting to their extension plans, Kim thinks she had accidentally started a war with her neighbours.
It's intimidation, really. It kind of feels like, well, because we can't have what we want, we're going to make your lives hell. He did speak to us on 2 occasions and said obviously he'd try and speak to his children. To my knowledge, Mr. Neighbour did speak to his children, but obviously the balls didn't stop coming over. It got worse and worse. Sunday the 20th, Mr. Neighbour's son had 4 new balls and they were told by Mr. Neighbour to keep bouncing them all the time. Mr. Neighbour's children seemed to think that the fence was a football goal, so it was constantly kicking the ball at the fence more or less all day if they were in the garden. It was a constant boom, 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 and with quite a force, as if like they were kicking it to try and break the fence. March the 15th, 3:20 p.m, a white stick was thrown over the fence. I took a photo of it. It was driving us insane.
Kim and Mary called the council to complain.
Originally there was a 4-foot fence, which used to come up to about here. But as you can see now, there's a 6-foot fence being put in place by the local council, hoping to basically improve relations between myself and Mr. Neighbour.
They also advised her to keep hold of any more objects that came over the fence. But this simple suggestion would have dramatic consequences.
He said, you've been swearing at my kids, and if I catch you swearing at my kids once more, he said, I swear, he said, I'll get someone to do you over. I won't be doing it, someone else will be doing it.
Coming up, Ellen Harris fights fire with fire.
That's the only thing I can think of, the only thing we can do to retaliate.
And in the retirement park,
You don't give me my dog!
all hell breaks loose.
I was frightened for our lives.
When the Al-Wakari family moved into the flat above Ellen and Cyril Harris in East London, their young children were immediately accused of being too noisy.
Very loud, isn't it?
Disgusting, isn't it? Yeah.
But May Al-Wakari claims her family were victims of racial abuse.
After I told her where I'm from, she said to me, all these foreigners moving to this country, Britain's not Britain anymore.
He said to me, you're a racist, witch, and if you don't go inside now, I'll come down and smash your face in.
By 2012, the 2 women lost patience with each other.
As I was coming in my front door, the lady above was standing on the banister. She said to me, you're a witch and I hope you die.
But Mrs. Al-Wakari had an entirely different story.
5 policemen turned up, and the 2 that came in here said that I'd called them a racial comment.
They was going to arrest her.
Yeah,
And
they
put
nearly
her
got
in
me
a cell,
arrested.
would you believe? Put her in a cell.
But he said, Mrs. Harris, it's 11 o'clock at night. You're 79 years of age, and we are not going to put you in a cell at this time of night. And that was the end of that.
Ellen had escaped a night in the cells. But she claims the continued noise from the flat above wasn't much of a consolation.
What's that?
I want to sit there.
Oh.
Ellen and Cyril were desperate to prove they were the victims. So, using recording devices provided by the Housing Association, they tried to monitor the noise coming through the ceiling.
At one time we had 5 hours, would you believe, on the tape, and they said there was nothing much on there.
It's got to be at least 90 decibels before they can accept that you are putting up with noise.
To me, it would be like a band in a hall, 90 decibels.
Which is ridiculous.
With the noise monitors failing to prove anything, for Ellen and Cyril, home life was becoming unbearable.
It's got to affect your nerves, and that's what it did to me. You don't want to eat. And I'm slim enough as it is, I've always been tiny. So I actually went down to 5 stone in weight.
Plus at one time, my wife said to me, she said, I've had enough. She said, I want to die.
I did.
It broke my heart to see my wife going through this because of these people.
I can only, in my heart, think that they are deliberately trying to stop us from having any enjoyment.
It's all just made up, really. It was very quiet. I hardly ever, would make a sound.
Ellen Harris was by now the highest volume caller to her local police station.
Since all the trouble started, I must have called the police at least 100 times.
No one wants the police knocking on their door every day. Sometimes they just come when my kids are fast asleep. It really is affecting me.
As a result of her constant complaints, Ellen was issued with a harassment warning. But she soon took matters into her own hands.
It gets to the stage when you think to yourself, why should we have to live like this?
But Ellen wasn't the only one feeling helpless. In Ludlow, Pauline Bruce's son John had been granted permission by the retirement park owner to move in with his mom temporarily, following the death of his stepfather Tony. And to ensure his mother could grieve in peace, John kept a close eye on Yvonne next door.
I was hoping that maybe a little more presence and vigilance on my behalf would quieten her down.
Can you see all right?
Can you see okay?
But it didn't work. I think actually I might have antagonized the situation.
John soon found himself directly in the line of fire.
As soon as I walked through that back gate, she'd be waiting somewhere.
You know, you're a wanker. Got no money to hold your hand today.
She'd call me mama's boy, queer boy.
Mummy's little boy had to get his own tea today.
She would literally shout over the fence, every time the dogs go woof, it reminds me he's a puff. Which is tragic because I'm heterosexual.
One summer afternoon, while Pauline was with family in the lounge, John heard more singing coming from over the garden fence, so set his camera rolling.
I heard this crash bang, and Scrappy was in the jaws of a pretty big dog.
Mom! The dog, Mom! Mom! The dog just attacked Scrappy!
In the meantime, Yvonne had come through the fence with a pair of secateurs. And I think my aunt was one of the first ones out the door.
Your dog just attacked my dog. I got it on video.
Hey, don't be my dog.
And that's when it all started.
Get it on video. Yes.
She lashed out a couple of times at me. She brought up the pair of secateurs. It missed my throat by about an inch.
Careful.
I was frightened. I think I was frightened for our lives.
I want my dog. You'll get your dog. You'll get your dog. You don't give me my dog.
A couple of people took a bit of a battering.
You're trespassing. Your dog attacked my dog. Your dog attacked my dog.
I'm not saying
You're not responsible. You're not.
Go.
She's stabbing me. She's stabbing me. Hey, open the door. She's stabbing me with secateurs. Open the door.
Although John wasn't stabbed, he was shaken by the incident.
It got a little hairy. Then, one form or another, we managed just to get her out, get the dog out, and close the door after us.
Are you okay? Oh, no. The dog jumped over and attacked my dog. I've got it all on video. Get the police here now.
So I managed to ring the police. And I was crying, talking to the telephonist.
6 years.
Can't do it, me.
Well, I dread to think what she could have done.
Yvonne later told police she was acting in self-defence and they chose not to pursue the case any further. But Pauline and John refused to give up, so showed their video to the owner of the retirement park.
He had no choice, so eviction proceedings were started.
Citing Yvonne's nuisance phone calls and John's video evidence, together with complaints from other residents, Yvonne was served an eviction notice. After 6 years, Pauline thought her nightmare was finally coming to an end. But Yvonne had other ideas.
Get off the park.
Not all neighbour disputes get violent. For some, the war between neighbours becomes more psychological.
8:30 p.m, the two boys threw a ball over the fence.
Just months after moving into their new home, Kim Aman and her mum Mary had started to write exhaustive diaries, logging each noise nuisance from their neighbours, the Deaver family.
21st of the 7th, both boys bouncing balls against the wall.
Kim claims it all started when she opposed their plans for an extension.
Life was like living a nightmare as hell.
And according to Kim, the noise soon spilled from the garden to inside the house.
One Saturday night, all of a sudden there was a noise from next door. It started off with the kids screaming at the top of their voices. And what followed after that was like either weightlifting bars or some kind of metal poles, literally with a thump, as if they were picking them up and just dropping them. And then the next thing we heard was like a thump against the wall, as if they were banging the poles against the wall. It was as if they were in a playground. That's what it sounded like.
Kim claims she confronted Salahdin Deaver about his children's behaviour.
He laughed at us and said kids will be kids, which fair enough they can be, but to a certain extent this isn't kids being kids.
Despite this, Kim wasn't happy to accept Mr. Deaver's claim. She is convinced they were deliberately trying to antagonise her.
Mr. Deaver's son had come into our garden, obviously asking for his football back.
Kim refused to hand the ball back.
At that point, Mr. Deaver's son turned around and called me a cow. Mr. Deaver then approached me by calling me, demanding me to go up to him. He said, if you continue swearing at my children, I swear there'll be trouble, big trouble, and I'll get you done over and it won't be me doing it. I felt scared. I felt intimidated, frightened. So I went in, I dialed 999.
We contacted Mr. Deaver for his version of events, and he didn't respond. But the police did speak to him and decided not to pursue Kim's complaint. Instead, they invited Kim to meet with them and council officials to put an end to the problems.
The meeting took place. We still weren't given a fair hearing. No one even wanted to listen to our points of view. The local authority, and probably I'll say more so the police and the antisocial behaviour team, are more implying that it's me and my mum myself which are causing the antisocial behaviour, which is currently not true. I got wound up, upset, I ended up walking out.
We asked the police to comment on the ongoing dispute, and they said that there is no evidence to suggest that either party is more culpable than the other. Kim, however, convinced she is being harassed by Mr. Deaver, has taken it to the next level.
I felt as if the local police weren't going to help me, then I'd try to help myself by taking an injunction out against Mr. Deaver.
And while waiting for a court hearing to stop the alleged harassment from Mr. Deaver, his building plans were approved.
From the plans, Mr. Deaver intends to do quite a big extension with a long conservatory in the back garden, but he would like to bring his extension just over the boundary.
But according to that, he will just be building where his fence is rather than coming over this side.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's correct, obviously there.
All that would change is that your fence would turn from a wooden fence to just a brick wall.
That's correct. That Mr. Deaver obviously would be building a brick wall, but it would be loss of light, closure, and it'd feel like we'd be living in a prison.
Since filming, Kim has been fighting to win the injunction against Mr. Deaver. But despite this, Kim and Mary have decided it's time to move on.
My mum's nearly 70 now, so she doesn't need it. She's retired from work. She wants a peaceful life, basically.
So we're in the process of hopefully moving.
Coming up, bad blood boils over in Walthamstow.
You're a bitch! Okay, you're using your children as weapons against us!
And it's demolition day in Ludlow.
Rip down the fence, rip down the shed, rip down everywhere.
In Walthamstow, after 6 years of complaining about the Al-Wakari family making too much noise, Ellen and Cyril Harris fought back by banging on a cupboard in the stairwell.
That's the only thing we can do to retaliate.
She would come out every day and she would do it late at night, and that was just really disturbing everyone.
And one day in August 2014, tensions erupted in explosive fashion.
The noise carried on quite bad, so I got my stick and I come out here and I banged on this cupboard door.
It's all started with her banging again, no reason, out of nowhere.
Next thing, the resident came down the stairs, took my photo and said, "I'm calling the police and I'm taking you to court." I was a bit shocked, but I had enough time just to say to her, "You bitch, you bitch." And that's the first time I've ever used any swear words at all.
May El-Wakari was in fact filming Ellen on her mobile phone that night. She has released the following footage to us.
You're a bitch!
Okay,
You're using your children as weapons against us!
Okay.
Yeah, you bitch!
I'm calling the police right now and I'll show them this video and I will take you to court.
Yeah!
You're trying to scare my kids. Watch.
I feel like harassed by her since the day I moved in here.
2 days later, a letter arrived from the council accusing Ellen of making threats of physical assault.
I didn't threaten her at all with my stick, and there was no way I was going, no way, to attack her. Nothing in my head and nothing in my mind to attack her at all.
The couple were threatened with eviction and summoned to a meeting with the council and police.
A form was produced by a tenancy officer and we were asked to sign it.
It was an acceptable behaviour agreement, banning them from causing alarm, distress or harassment to others, more commonly given to teenagers.
We were very unhappy with the clauses in it and the way it referred to us, just as though, once again, as we were the perpetrators and the people upstairs above us were the victims.
It's like a living nightmare, really. I've just had enough of it. I honestly don't see that she'll ever stop doing what she's doing.
Every time I turn the corner to come into the cul-de-sac, I hate it. I hate living here at the moment. If it wasn't for my husband, I wouldn't be here. Our council have said, well, why don't you, Mr. Harris, move?
I'm 88, I've got a pacemaker, and I live from day to day, and I certainly ain't going to move now in this position. Now, that's final.
Since filming finished, Ellen was called into the local police station. After being questioned for 6 hours and having photographs and fingerprints taken, she was cautioned under the Public Order Act for causing fear, provocation or violence, and warned she will appear in court if she continues to harass her neighbour. In Ludlow, Yvonne Ireland Evans was evicted by her landlord and given 8 weeks to leave. But there was to be no last-minute truce between the warring neighbours.
Life was like nothing had changed. She was still nasty.
Late one evening, while Pauline was having dinner with friends at the hotel nearby, John arrived at the house and spotted something strange.
I can see it from here. There she is. I looked up towards Mum's house and I could see somebody with a flashlight. So I had a camera with me
turned the camera on, started videoing. With the camera still rolling, I made my way up the path. Got to about here.
Why are you flashing lights around Mum's house?
And the next minute, Yvonne came around.
Don't you think it's time you guys went?
Isn't it time you went?
Really? Really?
She started to hit me. The camera was still rolling. I backed away a bit.
Are you serious?
Get off the park.
Oh dear.
I'll give you all to chucking stones at my window.
Oh dear. You're dreaming.
No.
And then I just left the car, left the scene, walked down, walked back around to the hotel, and told my mum that I'd just been assaulted.
Even though Yvonne had been served with eviction, she refused to go quietly.
In the end, the bailiffs came.
Yeah, 12 months ago today.
Yes.
And saw her off the park. Still making comments towards the owner because he was here as well.
Yes.
And she's not allowed back on the park.
Then when the owner of the park decided to knock down Yvonne's old home, John jumped at the chance to offer a helping hand.
I ripped down the fence, ripped down the shed, ripped down everywhere where she used to hide and photograph us and harass us.
Each piece taken down was a piece of her being taken away from us. And I've got to be honest, I'm not sorry that she's gone. I have a much more peaceful life now. I'm starting to grieve for Tony more. I miss him terribly and just so sorry he wasn't here to see the day that she went.
Yeah.
But after nearly 7 years of hell, and with the prospect of a new home being built next door, Pauline finally feels she can begin to look forward to the future.
At the beginning of next year, I will be getting some new neighbours. And I pray to God that they will be nice neighbours and not neighbours from hell.
Have you got a nightmare neighbour story? Get in touch at channel5.com/nightmare neighbour. Next time, parking wars lead to violence and arrest.
What, me? I say to well, I'm under arrest.
Old friends become deadly enemies.
Pulled out a knife and started swinging it.
And an attack with a hose pipe.
The water just hit me straight in the face. I just can't win.
If you missed last week's episode, just head over to 5 Star now for more Nightmare Neighbour Next Door. Next, right here on Channel 5, we're taking a look behind the headlines at one of the world's most beloved comedians in new autopsy, The Last Hours of Robin Williams.